Hello, thank you for attending my flash presentation. My name is Tyler Waltz. I'm a graduate student at North Dakota State University studying natural resources management. Today's conversation is going to be all about pollinators, what pollinators do, the benefits they provide us, and kind of the dilemma that they currently face. And I'll be talking about pollinators, particularly in an area called the Prairie Potholes Region. The title of today's talk is Emerging Problems in the Prairie Potholes Region, Biological Degradation and the Loss of Pollinators. Starting off, Prairie Pothole Region contains many wetlands. So let's define a wetland. A wetland is basically three things. It's hydraulic vegetation, hydraulic soil, and hydrology. Basically that means lots of water, saturation, vegetation, and organic matter within the soil. The main key thing to defining a wetland is they are at least visible 5% of the year, saturated, and present during the growing season. Now, the Prairie Pothole Region is a vast area of land, covers both in Canada and the United States. Within, scrolling up here, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and into the states we have Montana, North and South Dakota, Minnesota, and dipping down into Iowa. What is the importance of wetlands, and particularly Prairie Pothole Region? One, they're essential wildlife habitat for over 200 species of animals, anything from mammals, reptiles, amphibians, to waterfowl. Now, all of these different entities in the environment use it for different reasons, anything from mating to food sources, as well as cover and protection away from predators. An important thing to note is it's an essential migratory area for waterfowl, such as mallards, ducks, that type of thing. So one key thing is, even though only 10% of breeding is done in the Prairie Pothole regions, it accounts for over 50% of production of waterfowl, which is very significant. Another key factor is foraging. So this is essential for farmers, ranchers, for their cattle, livestock. Lots of grasslands and wetlands, of course. And those grasses that you find have high protein contents in the spring, as well as low digestibility. So both are key critical elements if you're feeding and sustaining your livestock. Next, we have water quality. Water quality is important because you obtain by absorbing a lot of essential nutrients within the soil. This is done by organic matter and vegetation, locking things in, as well as tying up heavy metals such as iron or even nickel within the soil. Another key element is groundwater recharge. I won't talk too much about that here. However, one important factor last on our list is flood attenuation. Wetlands are critical because they lock in groundwater and saturate that water, right? So you have less flooding that you would see otherwise. Into what happens with erosion as well as deforestation in a little bit, but for now, flood attenuation is a key element to wetlands. So talking about environmental ethics, we have two key approaches I'll be talking about here about who and what matters. So what entities are there? Our first topic is anthropocentric. This is a human-oriented view. It's usually held up by the main monotheistic religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. So this is going to be human-oriented, human-driven goals. It can be anything from taking care of the land as like a stewardship role, or exploitation such as dominion or domination of the land, really exploiting the natural resources out of it. The other element is biocentric. This is a bit different. You may attach like a Buddhist role to this as well. But biocentric is looking at the environment, looking at nature and saying all living things matter and they may have a role structure to them, a hierarchy I should say, but they are all worth thinking about and caring about. So it calls for rethinking our relationship between humans and nature. Anything from rights and protections to legal entities, as well as why we establish national and state parks, as well as wildlife reserve areas. Really sectioning off land so that you have greater biological diversity. So what are some wetland values? They're social, economical and ecological. Let's touch on the first one, that being aesthetic beauty as well as recreation. One big conservation group out there in the Prairie Pothole region is Ducks Unlimited, and they are funded and seek to preserve the land as well as ensuring there's adequate waterfall, that people can also hunt, but it also is a sustainable measure. Ecological, so this is habitat and food sources for wildlife. And economic, so these may be services, ecological services, that are beneficial to us. Some of them may be water quality, productive sites, and pollinators. And today's conversation is primarily on pollinators within the area. So what are those pollinators? Bees, bats, birds, and butterflies. These pollinators are essential because they provide around 85% of pollination, things that we could not do artificially or on our own, right? Even with the technologies we have. In the United States alone, over 100 crops are benefited by these pollinators. Anything from eating insects and pests that are on those crops to pollinating the area that would not get done otherwise. The bee industry is a few $billion where people move bee colonies to help farmers out. That could be anything from orchard to your typical small crops. Another advantage of pollinators is not only do they pollinate, but you have species like birds that disperse seeds, as well as bats that move throughout the area at night in their massive roost, and they can eat up to 1,000 tons of insects per night. And a lot of those could be anything from mosquitoes to moths, but they do target a lot of crop pests. One of those is earthworm larvae and moths affecting crops. Pollinators assist in reproduction of plants used for fibers such as cotton and flax, so for our clothing, right? How do we protect pollinators? Well, it's usually done through the use of border buffers. Border buffers are between, say, main cropland and a wetland. They're a buffer area where a lot of bees, for instance, use as nesting grounds and dig tunnels. If you diminish these areas, you kind of have a reduction in biological diversity, and a lot of the colonies for bees will utterly disappear. You also see things such as milkweed, which are essential for butterflies, currently in North Dakota, a severe factor for monarch butterflies. So what happens when these wetlands are reduced? So first off, North America is experiencing a 53% loss already. In the Prairie Pothole Regions, that is 71% reduction of wetlands, meaning they have dried up, they are gone. A few reasons for that is both direct and indirect measures. Directly, a lot of this is due to agriculture, using the water for irrigation, taking it for something else, converting it into cropland, as well as forestry. Forestry, your logging, can lead to mass erosion, as well as getting rid of that topsoil through erosion. A few other elements would be pollution, dikes, dams, and groundwater withdrawal. Indirectly, this is done via our intensive agriculture globally, as well as our connection to fossil fuels. In conjunction, those things have led to climate change disasters that have lasting measures throughout the globe. What can we do about this? Is there anything we can do? Well, one main site I like to point out is Xerxes Society for Invertebrate Conservation. And let me just switch over here just a moment. If you go to Xerxes Society, this is their main website here. I have a few pages up, but you can navigate to your state or wherever you live and kind of scroll through the options. I happen to live in North Dakota, where the Prairie Pothole Regions is prevalent. Clicking on North Dakota, here would be the first page. Second one is going to bring me to a bunch of different native species, both plants, shrubs, and trees that I can plant to help out our main pollinators in that state. So if I go to milkweed, which is in rapid decline due to use of pesticides, which means the monarch butterfly is jeopardized, we can see that's one that we could plant here, and it's also a great nectar source for bees. So Xerxes Society is one option that we have out there, and I encourage you to take a look, even if you're an avid gardener more than anything else here. It just gives you a lot of options that are native species in your area. Other things we can do is restructure our thinking. Looking at soil health, good soil, organic soil, means that it has nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. By overworking the land, overusing the land for agricultural purposes, you have a diminishing of the soil health. So the way you can fix that is talk to policymakers and having local conversations with farmers and other people, landowners, that this is their livelihood and you want to reframe their mindset, right? So talking about the benefits of pollinators, that using too much pesticides or overworking the land, reducing wetlands is going to take away from pollinators in which they actually benefit significantly. Another thing that can be done is similar to CRP plotlands, you can have financial incentives. So that may be similar to retiring an area of land, and then that landowner, that farmer, that rancher would then receive a financial incentive. So I want to thank you for coming to my flash presentation. I hope you enjoyed my talk, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me with this email address below. Thank you.